Hello, everybody. This is Gaianet, and I have a message for Thunderfoot. Just a throwing out of ideas here. I'm trying to be kind of a debating kind of mood here. Um, I'm not a climate denier. I would kind of describe myself as more of a skeptic, and the reason is that I'll get into that. But I'm responding to this video. Global warming stopped in 1998, busted, and he goes through a bunch of claims made by YouTubers and the like, that global warming was on the pause since 1998, and then he presents a few graphs stating that basically showing where they are wrong in some cases, and then he kind of like mocks them because they didn't go all the way back to 1900. And it strikes me as an odd argument because if you go through this graph, obviously from 1900 onward, we've been going through a warming cycle. Yeah. But then if you're going to go all the way to 1900 like he did, then why can't you go earlier? And I'm going to kind of like go through my arguments of why the earth is not a stable thing. It's not a static environment at all. It's continually changing, and I have some data to prove it. And I'm going to go through some of these graphs. First off, we're going to go through basically the last 400 years instead of going just not stopping at 1900 here. We've got actually like 1600 years. And this particular graph here is a recording of the number of sunspots. Obviously, the data recording kind of changed in the years after 1750, but you can see that there was quite a bit of change here associated with the activity of the sun. And in this case, this is the activity associated with the sunspots versus the climate temperature here experienced by the Earth. And you can see from the data that there are a lot of correlation points here between sunspot activity or lack thereof being recorded here. And in this case, it correlates here as well, and a little bit here as well as. So in 1900, we were kind of at a, it's 12 o'clock, so I'm not going to re-record this. So 12 o'clock, that window up here appears, and don't just ignore that. Just keep going with the graph. But you can see there is correlation between the sunspot activity being observed in the minimums and the maximums here. Okay, so that is my first argument right here, is that the data shows that global warming ties more readily to sunspot and solar activity than it does with CO2. We try to pin the CO2 levels to the cause of global warming, and I really think we should rethink that concept, Thunderfoot. We should rethink that concept because in a lot of ways, like, the major contributor to our environment should be the total heat source that we experience, which is the sun, right? And the sun is not a static thing. The sun has its variations in sunspot activity and irradiance. It's not a constant thing. You can't say that it's a constant thing. Nothing is. That's the way of nature. Like even the Earth like experiences chaotic changes. Now obviously we've experienced an increase of carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide, all going into the atmosphere. And admittedly, a lot of it has to do with us. We are changing the composition of the atmosphere, and that is maybe the case that we are maybe staving off a decline in temperature, but we are nowhere near this high that we've experienced in the last few years. as you can see, what we've got here is a correlation, once again, between the temperature and the carbon dioxide composition of the Earth. Okay? And you can see that there's quite a bit of compensation. But when you take a look at it and you see the sunspots here, and you see this like correlation here between the temperature and the carbon dioxide, then you should probably ask yourself, is it the carbon dioxide that's causing global warming, or is it the sun and the warmer temperatures are causing the more CO2 in the atmosphere, right? It seems like it would make more sense, and it's a simpler approach, that the warmer temperatures that you have, the more life that you have on the surface of the Earth. And therefore, the more animal life that can survive, because I can't prove this, and this is off the top of my head, but I think that animal life is a little bit more fragile than plant life. You would get this sort of like, more animal life breathing oxygen and forcing out CO2. So it makes sense that when you have these warm peaks, places that couldn't support life here in the cold peaks could actually survive in more areas, and therefore animals would be able to survive in, say, Canada, Minnesota, Siberia, those places. And so they would take up a lot more oxygen and they would breathe more carbon dioxide. And so, yeah, we're going through all these graphs and it seems to make sense. And you see the correlation between irradiance, sunspots, and the climate of the Earth. And it's very simple. Here we go. One more thing where you've got the CO2 being listed here, and it's being basically correlated with the temperature of the Earth. And so once again, I think you have your cause and effect backwards when you talk about global warming and climate change. Now, why am I saying this? You can talk about like being clean and being environmentally friendly all you want, but if you're trying to tackle something that you don't really understand, and not even like astronomy is like certain anymore. There's so many like people who are disagreeing with even Einstein right now. And I'm an electrical engineer as my main job, and it makes total sense that astronomy is in an abysmal state right now, because you've got things like dark matter, which like astronomers like totally made up because they noticed the discrepancy of galaxies and how they rotate around the center, right? So they came up with dark matter. But then there's a whole bunch of scientists right now coming up with alternate theories, like, what the scientists of astronomers forgot in the universe? They forgot about electric force, which is so many more times more powerful than the force of gravity. But look it up. I mean, I'm an electrical engineer. I know the constants in my head, and the constant of electric force is a lot more powerful, or a lot more, it's more in scale powerful than the force of the gravitational constant that's used in astronomy. So, but that's for another video. I'm just saying that, what if, for instance, we come across the scenario where these sunspots decrease again, and we get a global cooling, or like the solar irradiance, like, which is probably in a correlation with solar activity. Like, I've been hearing reports that we are way, way, way overdue for an ice age. So instead of preparing for global warming, maybe we should utilize the warmer times in our planet to grow as much food as possible to prepare for an eventual ice age, which this stuff is cyclical. I mean, it's going to happen again. There's going to be another mini ice age fairly soon, maybe. We should probably be prepared for something like that, because if it hits and we're all of a sudden like caught off guard because we're preparing for the wrong scenario, maybe we should have like been like growing more food and preparing for that inevitability. So that is my message. I'm not really good at making these sort of like political, like skeptical videos, but I hope you guys like that. I don't really post on this channel as much as I should, but that's quick and dirty, right? Okay, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.